Not every city stands the test of time. Some vanish, swallowed by nature, erased by war, or simply abandoned without a trace. These places once thrived with life, culture, and history, but today, they don't even show up on maps. What's left? Crumbling ruins, eerie silence, and secrets buried beneath the dust. From entire metropolises left to rot, to eerie villages frozen in time, here are 15 abandoned cities you won't find on any map, and what's really inside. Number 15. Hampi, India. Hampi wasn't just a city, it was an empire in stone. In the 14th and 15th centuries, it was the capital of the Vijayanagara Empire, one of the most powerful and advanced civilizations in India. With over 500,000 people, its streets were lined with sprawling markets, towering temples, and grand palaces. But power invites destruction. In 1565, an alliance of sultanates stormed in, unleashing chaos. Hampi was burned, looted, and left for dead. The city, once overflowing with wealth and life, became a ghost town overnight. Today, its ruins stretch across 4,100 hectares. Pillars still stand, temples still whisper forgotten prayers, and stone chariots remain frozen in time. It became a UNESCO World Heritage Site in 1986, but despite its global recognition, many parts of Hampi remain uncharted. Who knows what secrets lie under its crumbling foundations? Number 14. Mandu, India. Mandu was built for joy. That's what its name means, City of Joy. And for centuries it lived up to that name. Sitting high on a plateau in Madhya Pradesh, surrounded by walls stretching 45 kilometers, Mandu was a paradise of palaces, pleasure pavilions, and ornate canals. It was a city where architecture met poetry, where kings and courtiers indulged in lavish celebrations. But all that beauty couldn't save it. Mandu was abandoned over 400 years ago, left to time and decay. Some say war was to blame. Others whisper of betrayal and curses. Today, its ruins remain eerily intact, scattered with remnants of a forgotten golden age. The rock-cut caves, once decorated with vibrant paintings, now hold only faded echoes of their past. The city is sometimes visited by wandering nomads, but at night, Mandu belongs to the ghosts. A city that once celebrated life now stands frozen in death, a haunting contradiction. Number 13. Belchite, Spain. Belchite is a war zone that never healed. Founded before 75 AD, it survived for centuries, its medieval streets and grand churches shaping a thriving community. But in 1937, during the Spanish Civil War, all of that was reduced to rubble. Republican and fascist forces fought one of the bloodiest battles of the war here, turning the town into a graveyard. Buildings collapsed under relentless shelling, streets ran red with blood, and by the time the battle ended, Belchite was unrecognizable. When Franco took power, he refused to rebuild it. Instead, he ordered it to remain as it was, a decaying warning to anyone who dared to oppose him. Today, bullet holes scar the church walls, houses stand frozen mid-collapse, and a heavy silence lingers over the wreckage. Some visitors swear they hear whispers in the wind, the echoes of the war still trapped in the ruins. Belchite isn't just abandoned, it's haunted by history itself. Number 12. Ordos City, China. China's economic rise has been fast, so fast that some places simply couldn't keep up. Case in point, Ordos City, an ambitious urban project in Inner Mongolia, was designed in the early 2000s to house over 1 million people. The Chinese government poured billions into its construction, expecting a modern metropolis to rise. Instead, what they got was one of the world's biggest ghost cities. Drive through Ordos today, and you'll see miles of empty roads, gleaming high-rises with no tenants, and entire districts swallowed by silence. It was built for a future that never arrived. Only 1/10 of the planned population ever moved in. With entire condo complexes left unfinished, it feels more like the set of a dystopian film than a city. Some visitors describe it as eerily post-apocalyptic, a silent monument to China's overestimated urban expansion. If you ever wanted to know what loneliness looks like in city form, Ordos is it. Number 11. Tianducheng, China. China wanted its own Paris, so it built one. In 2007, the government developed Tianducheng, a French-inspired city, complete with a 354-foot replica of the Eiffel Tower, Haussmann-style buildings, and even a knockoff Luxembourg Gardens fountain. It was meant to house 10,000 residents, giving them a taste of Europe without ever leaving China. But something went very, very wrong. Poor planning and an isolated location turned this Parisian dream into a nightmare. Tianducheng was built in the middle of nowhere, making it impractical for people to live there. Despite its grandeur, it never attracted the residents it needed. Today, fewer than 2,000 people call it home, most of them working at the nearby French-themed amusement park. Now, it's mostly a backdrop for wedding photo shoots and curious tourists wandering its empty streets like extras in a movie set. A city built to imitate romance and culture now stands as a monument to artificial ambition, a Paris with no Parisians. Number 10. Ashgabat, Turkmenistan. Ashgabat isn't a ghost town in the traditional sense. It's full of buildings, but hardly any people. Built after Turkmenistan's independence from the Soviet Union in 1991, the city was meant to be a golden utopia, a showpiece of Turkmen wealth and power. The result? A city of opulence, with no one to enjoy it. With over 540 grand marble buildings, Ashgabat holds multiple Guinness World Records for its extravagance, including the world's largest Ferris wheel and the highest concentration of white marble in one city. But beneath the shiny exterior, Turkmenistan remains one of the most isolated and repressive countries in the world. Poverty runs rampant, and citizens prefer living outside the city, where life is simpler. Many of Ashgabat's luxurious hotels, amusement parks, and golden statues remain largely empty, their only visitors being curious tourists and government officials. It's a city built for vanity, a gleaming facade hiding the harsh realities of life in one of the world's most secretive nations. Number 9. Hutuan, China. Not all abandoned places are eerie wastelands. Some are stunning masterpieces sculpted by time. Hutuan, a once thriving fishing village off China's Shengshan Island, was home to over 2,000 people in its prime. But by the 1990s, modern fishing industries made traditional methods obsolete, and residents left in search of better opportunities on the mainland. By 1994, the village was almost entirely deserted. Then nature took over. Thick green ivy, twisting vines, and dense foliage slowly consumed Hutuan, turning it into a real-life fantasy land. Homes vanished beneath layers of greenery, staircases disappeared into hillsides, and what was once a bustling coastal community became an unintentional eco-wonderland. Despite its eerie beauty, only a handful of villagers remain, while tourists and photographers flock to witness this surreal sight. Some call it China's real-life Shire, but unlike a fantasy, Hutuan's fate was all too real. Number 8. Krakow, Italy. Perched on a rugged hill in southern Italy, Krakow looks like something out of a medieval fantasy film. Founded over 1,000 years ago, this ancient town survived through war, famine, and political turmoil. But nature proved to be its greatest enemy. By the 1800s, a series of earthquakes, floods, and devastating landslides began destabilizing the town. Buildings crumbled, roads disappeared, and cracks formed in the very foundation of Krakow. By 1963, the final 1,800 residents were forced to evacuate for their own safety. leaving behind a perfectly preserved ghost town. Today, Krakow's abandoned churches, stone streets, and eerie silence make it a hauntingly beautiful relic of the past. Filmmakers have taken notice. Movies like Quantum of Solace and The Passion of the Christ were filmed here, using its untouched ruins as the ultimate cinematic backdrop. But for all its Hollywood fame, Krakow remains frozen in time, a city where history never quite moved on. Number 7. Sanji Pod City, Taiwan. On the outskirts of Taipei, Taiwan sits a neighborhood that looks like something out of a sci-fi movie. Sanji Pod City, a bizarre collection of UFO-shaped homes, was meant to be a luxury beach resort in the late 1970s. It was designed for Taiwan's wealthy elite and U.S. military officers, but the project never made it past construction. Almost immediately, things started going wrong. A series of mysterious deaths among construction workers raised eyebrows, and accidents became disturbingly common. Some believed the land was cursed, a theory fueled by rumors that the site was built over a Dutch mass grave. Others pointed to a dragon-shaped statue that was broken during construction, supposedly unleashing bad luck. By 1980, the project was abandoned. The futuristic pod sat untouched for decades, slowly decaying into an eerie, alien-like ghost town. While some blamed paranormal forces, the truth was simpler. Rising costs and bad planning killed Sanji before it ever had a chance. Number 6. Kelso, California. Kelso wasn't built for people. It was built for trains. Founded in 1905, this tiny desert town in San Bernardino, California, existed solely to service locomotives. At its peak, it was home to 2,000 people, all working in railroads, mining, or iron processing. But when diesel-powered engines replaced steam locomotives, Kelso had nothing left to offer. As the train industry modernized, Kelso became obsolete. Workers left in droves, businesses closed, and by 1985, the last train rolled through town, officially sealing its fate. The town was left to rot in the desert, with its post office, train station, and homes abandoned. Today, Kelso still stands eerily intact, a perfectly preserved time capsule of the early 1900s. Visitors can explore the deserted rail yards, empty homes, and sun-bleached storefronts. It's a ghost town where time stopped, forever trapped in the golden age of steam locomotives. The only thing missing? The people who once called it home. Number 5. Hashima, Japan. Hashima Island, nicknamed Battleship Island due to its fortress-like shape, was once the most densely populated place on Earth. This isolated man-made island off the coast of Nagasaki was constructed in the late 1800s by the Mitsubishi Corporation, built to house thousands of coal miners and their families. At its peak, it thrived. Workers lived in 10-story apartment blocks with schools, restaurants, and even courtyards for leisure. But prosperity came at a cost. Many of Hashima's workers were forced laborers from Korea, brought in under harsh conditions during Japan's wartime expansion. When coal lost its value in the 1970s, Hashima became obsolete. By 1974, the island was completely abandoned. What remains today is a crumbling skeleton of its former self, darkened buildings, shattered glass, and rusted steel structures left to decay. Although it now attracts tourists, Hashima carries a heavy past, one that many believe should remain untouched. Not all ghost towns are just empty. Some are haunted by history itself. Number 4. Pyramiden, Norway. Pyramiden looks like something straight out of a Soviet-era post-apocalyptic film, because that's exactly what it is. Built in the early 1900s as a coal mining settlement, this Arctic ghost town sits on an island so remote it's only accessible by sea or snowmobile. Originally founded by the Swedes, the settlement was sold to the Soviet Union in 1927, where it became a symbol of Soviet ambition in the Arctic. For decades, Pyramiden was a fully functional town, complete with apartment complexes, a cultural center, and even a statue of Lenin watching over it all. But when the Soviet Union collapsed in 1989, so did Pyramiden. The last residents left in 1998, abandoning their homes to the seals, polar bears, and seabirds that now rule the streets. Today, the town is eerily well preserved. Books still sit on desks, propaganda posters remain pinned to walls, and an empty grand piano waits in silence. It's a frozen time capsule, forever stuck in Soviet limbo. Number 3. Akharmara, Georgia. Once home to 40,000 people, Akharmara in Georgia was a thriving mining town during the Soviet era. Built around rich coal deposits, it promised jobs, prosperity, and a future. But nothing lasts forever, especially in an industry tied to a disappearing resource. As coal declined, so did Akharmara. By the 1990s, the town was already on its way to becoming a relic of the past. Then came war. In 1992, Akharmara was caught in the siege of Tikvarcheli, a brutal conflict that cut the city off from essential supplies. For 400 days, residents relied on helicopter drops for food and medicine, but it wasn't enough. People fled, and those who remained found themselves in a town crumbling under neglect. Today, Akharmara is almost entirely abandoned, with only a handful of residents left among its decaying buildings. Nature is reclaiming everything. Trees grow through Soviet-era apartments, vines wrap around old factories, and silence has replaced the once bustling streets. Number 2. Body, California. Body was the Wild West at its wildest. In the late 1800s, it exploded into a boom town, its gold mines attracting prospectors, outlaws, and fortune seekers. At its peak, 10,000 people lived here, the saloons overflowing, the streets buzzing with rumors of riches. But gold is fickle. When the mines dried up, so did Body's future. By 1915, the town was mostly abandoned. Here's where it gets eerie. Body isn't just a ruin. It's perfectly preserved as if frozen in time. Furniture still sits inside decaying homes, stores still have unsold goods on their shelves, and even the town's church remains eerily intact. Some say the spirits of former residents never left. There's even a local legend. Take anything from Bodie, no matter how small, and you'll be cursed with bad luck. That might explain why so many people mail back souvenirs they stole, hoping to escape whatever haunts this forsaken town. Number 1. Pripyat, Ukraine. Pripyat wasn't just any Soviet city. It was a model of progress. Built in 1970, it housed 50,000 people, most of whom worked at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant. The streets were alive with families, schools, and entertainment. It even had a Ferris wheel ready to open for May Day celebrations. But on April 26, 1986, the unthinkable happened. Reactor number 4 exploded, releasing more radiation than Hiroshima and Nagasaki combined. Within hours, Pripyat was evacuated. Residents left their homes, possessions, and entire lives behind. Today, the city is a radioactive time capsule. Classrooms still have lessons written on chalkboards, toys sit untouched in nurseries, and nature has reclaimed what humans abandoned. Wolves roam the streets, trees grow through apartment buildings, and the infamous Ferris wheel? It never got to spin with passengers. While scientists say short visits are safe, Pripyat remains off-limits for settlement. For the next 20,000 years, no one can call it home. Yet tourists arrive in droves, drawn to the eerie stillness of a city that was erased overnight. If you have enjoyed this video, be sure to like, share, and subscribe. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you in the next one.